I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Kara Goldin is on the show today. She's the founder and CEO of Hint, an unsweetened flavored water. Her why not now moment sparked from a desire to overcome her addiction to Diet Coke and artificial sweeteners. I can relate to that. Her company is now nearing $100 million in annual sales. Kara shares specifically what happened the day she decided to start the company, and she talks through her very first steps. She had zero experience in the $99 billion beverage industry, and that may just be why she's been able to disrupt it so much. In this episode, Kara tells us a story about a time when the company gained, lost, and gained momentum again in a very short span of time. I love this story. It's an incredible learning opportunity to remind us that everything is connected. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poo-Pourri. Yep, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poo-Pourri have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopourri.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code Why Not Now? That's all one word. Also, you can now get Poo-Pourri at Target. Kara, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. And I have so much that I'm excited to talk with you about. But in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's get to first things first. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now? And we'll dissect that day, that minute, that hour.
So I think that basically, I'll go back to when I started Hint. It was really, a big decision for me as I was, I wasn't in food and beverage before. I was in tech before. And I was looking at, how to actually get myself healthier and, basically Hint, just to give some background to those of you who don't know what Hint is an unsweetened flavored water using real fruit extracts without diet sweeteners or sugar in it. It's 0 calories, but again, not using things like sugar or stevia. And I was really looking for a way to get myself to drink more water and found that all of the things that were out there in the market that were still water actually had some sort of, they were either not using real fruit extracts or it had some sort of sweetener in it. And so when I saw that nobody was really doing this, I thought, if I don't actually go do it, so this is my why not now, I didn't think anybody was going to go do it. And, what I had found just by switching myself over to, drinking at that time, creating it in my kitchen with just slicing up fruit and throwing it in water, it got me to drink more water, but also, lots of health issues that I had, including, I had excess weight on me. I was, I had a terrible adult acne. I had low energy. And I thought, I can actually fix this for myself, but then I can also fix it for lots of other people too.
And in learning more about your story, this is what fascinates me, is that your background has nothing to do with this, but you saw a problem and researched it and nobody else was solving it. And I have a little bit of a sweet spot, no pun intended, for the genesis of your problem because I was addicted to Diet Coke for the longest time as well. And that's really where, I've heard you talk about that being one of the catalysts for looking for an alternative. And so you didn't have experience in this. And one of my questions for you is, and now you're wildly successful, 13 years down the road. At the time, do you think ignorance was kind of bliss because this category is so competitive and tough? The fresh eyes that you had, would you say that that's really been a huge help for you?
Yeah, I think that the key thing when we were actually developing the product, I felt like because I didn't have experience in food and beverage, I actually had permission to ask why or why not. So, for example, as I was taking this from my kitchen into, a co-packing bottling facility, I felt like I was asking the questions like, how do I get a shelf-stable product that can stay on the shelf, without preservatives? And the typical answer that I was getting back from the manufacturer was, well, it has to have preservatives. And I said, well, things like juice don't have preservatives in it, so why do we have to have preservatives in it? And then I would get answers back from these manufacturers or co-packers like, well, I'm not really sure why. And so I would really push the issue and get people to actually stop and think about, why they were actually giving me stock answers as to why something wasn't able to be done, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I found is that because I was not coming from a soda company, right, that I was coming from a place of tech, I was smart, I was like inquisitive, right, that they were actually questioning their answers of, yes and no, can't be done. And then we would, it was basically the ability of me not sort of, accepting their answers was accepted because I hadn't had that experience in food and beverage.
I love that. You were challenging just out of logic versus the way things had always been done. And to back up, do you remember a moment where you literally, I'm sure this idea, in many cases, why not now ideas, they grow and they brew and they start to surface. And then there is kind of a moment of reckoning where we green light the idea. Did you have one of those?
Yeah, I think that the first time that I felt like this product was kind of green lighted was hearing myself when my first store was Whole Foods in San Francisco. And I went into Whole Foods and started talking to a guy he wasn't an official buyer for the store. He was just stocking the shelves. And as I started to talk to him about my health issues that I had sort of solved for myself by changing from diet soda to drinking, plain water with fruit, he had pointed me to a product called vitamin water. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not alone. Like there's a lot of people that actually are being, tricked by these companies that are calling themselves diet or vitamin or, these words, right? That I had fallen prey to sort of those marketing kind of messages. And I was listening to a guy that, was actually working at Whole Foods, right? And I thought, so here's a person that's around this all the time, and they've been fooled as well, that they're pointing me to this product called vitamin water. And so, I told them my experience was really, it wasn't just about the diet soda. It was really about, diet sweeteners. That diet sweeteners had, in my opinion, had given me, these problems. And so he was just really fascinated and saw my passion for this and was, really encouraging me to, take this to the next level. And my immediate response was, oh, I'm a tech executive. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I can't do that. And then, so I think that was probably the first moment where I really felt like, okay, I'm on to something, and this person sees it too, that I should go and do it.
And what was your very, very first step? I mean, you went into Whole Foods, solidified the fact that this is needed. How did you even know where to start?
Yeah, so I went into Whole Foods, and I mean, it's a bit of a funny story. So I, had this conversation with this gentleman, and then the next week I came in and went shopping at Whole Foods for my family, and he saw me there, and he said, "Oh, are you going to start the product, or are you going to start this, water product and bring it in?" And was sort of, joking around with me, and I really believed it had been sitting with me for the whole week, and I thought, oh, it's really interesting. I had looked around at a bunch of other stores. I had sort of spent my time kind of doing a lot of research around it, and thought I was really surprised that it wasn't out there already. And then finally just said, okay, I think I'm actually going to just go and like research it a little more at home. And I decided I'd take $50,000 out of my savings and try and figure out, how to actually manufacture this product. And I thought at this point I should actually rope my husband into this decision, since it was, a joint bank account. Having said that, I had made some money. And so I felt like, I didn't have to ask permission necessarily, but I, wanted to sort of alert him to the fact that I was going to go do this. And I also, on a parallel path, I had just found out that I was pregnant with my fourth child. And so I decided to tell him all at once that I was starting this company. I was pregnant with our fourth, which we hadn't totally planned on at this point, and that I was going to get this product launched prior to actually going into labor with my fourth child. And so the timeline to me was actually set by a personal situation that I knew was coming up, and that I would be able to take some time off, hopefully. It was really something that I just felt like I was just I could just see so clearly as a problem that needed to be solved that no one else was focused on.
That's amazing. Delivering that news to your husband, all packaged into one conversation, and so you did it. You actually were able to launch or get your first shipment delivery into Whole Foods. Was it the day that you went into labor? Or had your baby?
So it wasn't even like a shipment delivery. It was us like loading up our. We had gotten the delivery to our home, and it was us, my husband and I, loading up my Jeep Grand Cherokee and delivering it to the local store. And my husband said, "Okay, we'll go do this, but I need to carry the cases in because I don't want you going into labor in the store. That would be really awful." And I'm like, "Sure, okay, fine." So anyway, it was so that was like the true story. And I mean, truly, we thought at this point, like, we get our product into Whole Foods, which is not an easy task, but we thought we were, off to the races at that point, that everything was going to be, piece of cake. And, somebody told me early on this, the food and beverage industry, if you ever go to any of the trade shows that are, the natural products show down in Anaheim, which just happened, or some of the others, you see thousands of products that just never actually make it to the shelf. And, it's an amazing industry with, great people in it and great ideas, but to actually get your product on the shelf and get attention is I think the products that actually make it are the ones that really are solving true problems, not necessarily, Me Too products or products that are, a little, unique, that can't actually scale to be a large company. So it's So I think that, the fact that Hint got in and frankly, in the first 24 hours, I got a phone call while I was still in the hospital, and they had sold 10 cases in Whole Foods at that one store, and in 24 hours. And
Amazing.
I actually thought that the product was, I got the phone call, and my husband was talking to the gentleman that had given, me the okay to, like, oh, you should go do it, at the same guy. And I said, okay, he's on the phone. And of course I thought it was, friends or family calling to see how the delivery went. Instead, it's the guy from Whole Foods calling to tell me that the cases are gone. And, I grabbed the phone when I heard he was on the phone, and I said, who took the cases? Like, I still didn't believe that it was, a company. Like, it was just, it was crazy that, it was actually, it was like, this to me was just a passion idea that was going to help me actually get healthier. And I thought it'd be great. It will help other people get healthy too. But I just thought, like, wow, people are actually buying it. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
And it's so at no point, this is what's really interesting. There's a theme and thread about your story that you had such clarity. Like, even finding out you're pregnant and you still have zero need to just pause or question yourself, it seems. Especially entering this category, like I mentioned before, it's such a competitive, tough category. Do you think it was just the fact that you knew you were solving the problem, or how did you have such clarity? It seems most of the way, and maybe there were times where you really doubted, but it doesn't sound like it.
It's interesting. I mean, we talked about this a little earlier, that we both went to Arizona State University, and I speak on campuses a lot. And whenever I'm talking to college graduates, I always say, like, people who knew me in college, I can't imagine one of them would say that they thought that I would be a beverage executive, right? Like, it was really, for me, I was a journalism major with a minor in finance, and I always thought I was going to be a writer. And then, I got more and more into marketing as time went on. But for me, it really boiled down to, I wanted to do something with my life that actually solved problems. And I think especially as I was, challenged with having a situation where I felt like, I did not know how to lose the weight. I did not know how to get rid of this adult acne that I had, developed. And finally, when I slowed down a bit and actually took a minute to, like, breathe and try and figure out the problem that was facing me, I thought that there's just a lot of misinformation out there that's tricking people. And I thought, when I talked to friends of mine about the situation that I had uncovered, there were a lot of people who were sort of nodding their head, thought I was a little crazy, right? But also thought, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, you look great. You definitely are doing something. And I just thought, like, I think that that's really what gave me the confidence to sort of go and develop it into a company, because I felt like I saw it so clearly, and that I didn't feel like I even had to, like, tell people this is fact, right? I felt like I was just almost gifted with this mission to actually uncover exactly, what was going on. I don't know. It just seems so clear to me. And then I would say that, very soon after that, when people actually started tasting Hint and buying Hint, I would get letters early on from customers saying, oh my gosh, like, you've changed my life. You've helped me drink water instead of, these diet sodas. You've helped me control my type 2 diabetes. You've helped me lose weight. You've helped me, and so I thought, like, how awesome is it that I'm able to actually do something with my life that is, actually helping people versus just doing something, right? Like, that to me was something that, I mean, I would wish it upon everybody to be able to find that thing that you're doing that actually helps people in some way.
And I love how when you came to that point in the road where you knew this doesn't exist, and if someone doesn't, no one else is creating it. And so kind of the whole, if not now, then when? And if not you, then who? It was like this, okay, this is my job. This is what I have to do. And so for advice to entrepreneurs or actually to aspiring entrepreneurs out there, and a lot of the listeners we have here are thinking about starting their own business, thinking about starting their own thing. And some of them write into me and say, I'm ready. I want to do it. I just don't have my idea yet. I don't have that thing. What advice would you give to them other than look for all the problems in your life and see if you can solve them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a little bit of that, right? Like, I think it's just, try and find the things that you see as a problem, that you have ideas that could solve those problems, right? So, you look at entrepreneurs, whether it's Hint or, Sarah Blakely with Spanx, or, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, or, there's people that actually saw a problem and then had an idea of how to actually solve that problem. So I think if you've got something like that in front of you and you've got some ideas and you've got a fairly inexpensive way to sort of test out whether or not other people would be interested in that idea too, and whether it's a product or service, and kind of develop it out before you actually go out and raise money. Or, I think at the end of the day, I always say friends will say to you, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But if you're actually seeing whether or not they'll buy it or if they're going to use the product, that's really the tell-all as to whether or not you've got something here. Mm-hmm. And then I would say that, the other piece too is that I'm a big believer that the word entrepreneur today is this super sexy, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. You've got huge street cred if you go and become an entrepreneur. But the journey of an entrepreneur is really tough, and there's a lot of things that go on. And, being an entrepreneur, I mean, it can be a very lonely road, especially if you don't have a huge team in place in addition to sort of your product or service. You've often got to find capital in order to make it happen. And I always tell people, if you want to be an entrepreneur just because you're I want to be an entrepreneur, there's a lot of easier ways to make money, right? But I also believe that if you're trying to figure out, should I be an entrepreneur, why not join an entrepreneur? Because, this sort of goes to a whole other topic that I think this, in addition to the word entrepreneur as being sort of this, very positive buzzword in today's society, I think the word leader is also something that is overused. Every commercial I see or piece of paper that I see for colleges or business schools or whatever, we produce leaders. And there's nothing wrong with being a contributor, right? Every single great entrepreneur or every single great leader needs contributors, and call them contributors. You can, at times call them followers, right? It's people that are actually making the ideas and, the leadership actually flow, right? Mm-hmm. And so I always tell people, look, if you don't have that idea that's actually going to solve a problem, or you want to know what it's like to go and be an entrepreneur, there's nothing wrong with going and finding something that you think is a great idea. And maybe it's an idea that you thought, oh, I should have thought about that. Or maybe it's actually solved a problem for you. And then go and actually join that company, or go and join that person to actually see, whether or not that can become reality. And I think that it's, if you're in the right company, and then I think especially if you're leaving your job that you're not super passionate about, that maybe, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to go and do this because I really want to go and learn. And maybe you decide, okay, I'm going to go do this for a year and see how it goes. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You can always get back on the track of actually going back into a large company once you've gone into a smaller company. I think especially if you're able to articulate exactly why you did what you did.
That's great advice, for sure. And even trying to work for a startup. If you think you want to be an entrepreneur, there's no better place to be than up close to the front line, but still, what a place to cut your teeth, not necessarily have to be the one that's in the driver's seat, but you get to learn and absorb so much during those early stages.
Yeah, and I think there's also different sizes too. Like I always, share with friends too who are thinking about joining a startup. It's like, what I've learned about myself, and I sort of jumped into this, but I'm a builder, right? Like I love the early stages and actually, trying to write the initial stages. I still, when we're launching into new areas within our company Hint, like we just launched into sunscreen, for example, I get very energized and excited by launching new initiatives. There's other people who really like the phase of having the funding totally done and having the team all developed and, and like really trying to really already having kind of the leaders in place, and they want to come in and actually get their job done versus actually creating exactly what divisions are and et cetera. So I think that's, you can call it, pre-Series A angel company, or you can call it a company, or call it a Series B or later, or a just gone public company, or whatever. But I think it's also going to a startup is also, that's one idea, but then actually figuring out like, what is it? Like, what are the different stages? And maybe you need to like actually go work in these companies that have been at different stages as well. So to actually try and figure out what skills you would really need, or really how transferable your skills that you already have would be to those companies too.
So changing gears for a minute here, I want to talk a little bit about momentum. Have there been times, and what have you done, if there have been times, and I'm sure there have, where you felt like you just lost a little bit of momentum, or maybe a lot, and you had kind of a drought? And what did you do?
So, it's interesting to think back on this. We had a situation a few years ago where, very exciting situation, where Starbucks reached out to us and put our product, our BlackBerry Hint, into a bunch of Starbucks. And it actually started out where they said to us, we'd love to put you in maybe 200 stores. And then they called us back a week later and said, could you guys actually handle going into 500 stores? And then it turned into 5,000 stores. And then they said, you know what, we'd love to put you in chain wide, right? So it was a major rush, right? Like to hear, oh my God, we're at Starbucks. We're at 11,000 Starbucks. It's so great. Like we're sitting here, oh God, how are we going to actually like make that much product? And, this was at a crazy time in our growth. And so anyway, we were very, very excited about it. And then I went and asked them, like, what would success look like? And they said, if you sold, if you sold a bottle and a half per store per day, then that would be success. And I thought, okay, so we're moving along over a year into the relationship, a year and a half into the relationship. We were on track. We were doing like 3 bottles per store per day. So we were way over what the number was. And so I was, feeling very, very confident. And one day we got a phone call from one of the buyers, and she said, I have really bad news for you. And I thought, oh my God, what's happened? And she said, unfortunately, we're going to be switching our cold case out and putting in a lot more food that has higher margins. And it's just Howard Schultz has said that this is what he wants to see happen. And so I said, well, like when is this going to happen? She said, next week. Oh, wow. So you're going to be pulled out of all 11,000 Starbucks stores. And I thought, oh my God, like this is millions of dollars in sales that I've got to go back to my board and tell them that this isn't going to happen. Right. And basically the decision was made. There was nothing I could do. I mean, I remember getting off the phone and I don't cry very often, but I remember crying, just being like, oh my God, this is awful. Right. Like on so many levels, and I didn't know how to make it up and with any other of our other distribution. And so I basically like went home that night and I thought about it and I thought, Starbucks gave us this opportunity over the last year and a half to actually be exposed to 11,000 doors, right? Where we would not be exposed to South Dakota. We would not be exposed to Iowa, right? If it wasn't for Starbucks. And they actually paid us, right? Like we didn't pay them. They paid us to actually buy the product and they sold it. And so I said like, well, I was really angry and, really upset about the fact that they were pulling us out. I also believed like we got some great exposure and, hopefully we'd be able to get into some stores around the area. And so a couple of days later, I got a phone call from Amazon. And Amazon said, hey, we're starting this grocery business and we're really excited to put you in. And I'm like, so where did you see Hint? I'm so curious. And they were like, oh, well, you were in our Starbucks. And now for some reason, like we haven't seen it in the Starbucks, but, I think you guys will do really well. And we'll buy the product from you. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And I mean, that's a whole other story where we very quickly became one of the top products on Amazon. But I thought, with every like shoe that drops, right? Like, you think, oh my God, like this is awful. And now I always look at like, what is the greatness that's going to come out of what has just happened? Right. Like, and so I always tell entrepreneurs that not only in my business life, but also in my personal life, that is a great story and great example of a situation where I felt like, the world was over, right? Like things were closing in on me and, it was just, it was an awful, awful situation. But then I realized that a week went by and all of a sudden, this new like sun came up, right? And, today, I mean, fast forward, we're not only in Amazon and Jet and some of the others, but we also have a significant direct-to-consumer business. And in total, it's almost 40% of our overall business. And that wouldn't have happened ultimately if it wasn't, I think, for Amazon, but also for Starbucks.
I was just going to make that point because I'm sitting here giggling thinking, geez, Starbucks introduces you in theory to Amazon and you have so much better margins and business is so different when it's D2C and that's what's been a really differentiating factor. So it's amazing. That's such a great story. I'm glad that hopefully you're sharing that in all of your speaking engagements because it's so true. It's interesting how one thing leads to the next. And a couple of quick questions, kind of rapid fire here to wind us up. How do you keep your mind healthy?
So I have to exercise every day. I mean, it's not just part of weight and muscles and all that, but I really think it's like great for my mind. And I find that if I don't get it done in the morning, it often gets skipped. So especially if I'm, on an early flight in the morning or something and I don't, on those, rare cases where I just can't do it, it's like very difficult for me because I end up getting on phone calls or something happens throughout the day. And so I make a point the minute I get up in the morning and I've sort of, reconfigured my life so that I can make that exercise happen in the morning and reconfigure. I'm talking about, I moved from San Francisco out to Marin County in order to basically I live right next to a state park. So I'm in the park every day. We have 100 miles of trails and I'm in there with my dogs and usually get my husband to join me as well. So I'm out there at like 6:00 in the morning, actually getting in an hour's worth of exercise before I actually start my day. as I mentioned earlier, I have kids, and I found early on that actually getting, somebody to come help me earlier in the morning actually solved a lot of my problems to be able to do that, get that exercise in for me. And then when I come back, I can quickly shower and actually grab breakfast quickly with my kids that, prior to them running off to school. So I think it's really thinking through, like, what kind of support do you need, not only, for support in terms of, exercise and making sure that your mind is able to do what you've got to do every single day, but also having the people support that kind of works around your schedule in order to make it all happen.
Nice. And what's one lesson you've had to learn over and over?
I would say I'm getting better at this, but I would say trusting my gut, and really believing that I can do whatever I set out to do. So I think that the biggest thing and I don't think this is just me, I think a lot of people have this issue, but it's just believing that just because you don't have industry experience, or maybe you didn't go to the right school, or I don't know, you're a woman and you can't, get it done. I'm a big believer that if you actually just say, no, I can actually get this done. And even if you have to just keep saying it to yourself, like, that is such a key driver for whether or not you'll actually be able to get it done. Because if you actually put up your own walls in front of yourself, whether, again, it's experience or inexperience or lots of other things, your gender, your like I said, your, where you went to school or whatever, that is like, you'll never actually be able to get it done, whatever you choose, whatever you're trying to, say you want to go do, whether it's run a marathon or start a company or what have you. You have to believe first. So I think I would say that that's the key thing that I've sort of learned. And again, I'm getting better at it. But initially, when I was starting Hint, everybody said, oh, you've got to hire people in who have come from the beverage industry. And so I thought, okay, go hire those people in. And the reality is that I actually think that people who have come from the beverage industry, unfortunately, are ones that, have been trained, brainwashed, however you want to think about it, to think a certain way versus, the curiosity that I had toward this industry and the passion totally trumps experience, as long as you believe in yourself and believe that you can go do it.
Mm. And what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think just sort of tagging on to that, just really believe in yourself and always be learning. And, things that I say to, my kids today, it's, I always, tell them that if you're at a point where you feel like, you've got this and you're confident in sort of what you're getting accomplished, always be looking around for something else that you can do or something else you can accomplish. It's not just about sitting still, because I often feel like you may sit still and think, okay, I've got this and I'm so great because I can do this task or, do this marathon or whatever it is, or do this, this job or role as a whole. But at the end of the day, I feel like you'll ultimately be itching to go do something else, whether it's outside the company or, you start to nitpick at things about, things in your company, whether it's your colleagues or your boss or just not be very happy. And I find that, the happiest people today are the ones that feel like, they don't have it all figured out yet. They don't have every little detail, like they're not on autopilot, right? They're still searching for those answers because they're just, again, going back to curiosity and inquisitiveness and all of those things. So I think I would just always be learning, always be curious, always want more. Those would be the key things for me as my younger self.
I love that. I always say curiosity is a great hobby to have. And I've just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and want to thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, totally. I've enjoyed it as well. Super fun.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?